Oh, let's learn about Olam Haba. The Rambam says you have to believe in these things, necessary belief or an obligatory belief. But what exactly it is that's subject to dispute. Where we get up to today? We talked about what Rambam says, what is the concept of having a body, what it means to enjoy the next world, right? These esoteric ideas. Well, we're in the laws of Teshuva. It's the second page here. It would get, I guess it's the 8th parak. It's not a Mishnah, it's a halacha. He said, hold on, maybe we got into the 3rd page also. He told Eretz Chaim, Ein koach, okay, you can understand it. Ein la erech v'dimayon. Okay. It says, let's go into the 12th halacha. It's on the 3rd page, 2nd paragraph. It'd be Chet Yud Bet. Paragraph Chet Yud Bet on the right side, 3rd page. Chet Yud Bet, Hilchot Teshuva. At least according to Machon Mamre. It might even still be in the 7th halacha according to other printings. So the question is, did the Rambam number his halachas? The answer is no. Instead, the Rambam wrote prakim and had different paragraphs. And different printers decided to break it apart into different numberings, right? So that's why you have, if you look in Machon Mamre, they have 2 different numberings going there. Their own that they propose and a more classical one that I guess is based on the Vilna printing. Huh? It's in Hilchos Teshuva, the 8th parak. Yeah, the 3rd page of what I printed here, or it's set out. He says here, Kvar hodiunu chachamim harishonim shetovado olam haba ein koach b'adam lahasiga al burya. They said that the goodness of the next world, man doesn't have the capacity to fully understand it. Right? You can't understand it. Vein yodea gedola v'yofya v'otzma ela kadosh baruch hu levado. No one knows its greatness, its beauty, and its power except for the Holy One, blessed be He, Him alone. All the good that the great goodness that prophets have told us about, they've foretold for us. Israel is, Jewish people. Einon ella lidvarim shel guf. For example, the prophets promised us times of peace and prosperity. That was talking about this world, where we have bodies. Shenanin bahen Yisrael bimot hamelech hamashiach. Israel will enjoy them in the Messianic era. Bizman shetachzor hamemshala liyisrael. When the Memshalah comes back to Israel, it means when time of, let's say, Jewish independence. Maimonides, like in other places, would define our times as Messianic times. But then he'd look around like Rashi. Rashi and Maimonides say that we are living in the Messianic era by their definition. So the question is, so why have we built the temple yet? Mostly because of something that I saw in the news before I got here. The Rosh Kola told me, I wake up trying to check the news around 5 a.m. or so, but then news happens between 5 and 9 a.m. Then you hear like other things happen. So around between 8 and 9 p.m. a.m. this morning, an Amalekite tried to kill Jews just south of Jerusalem at the checkpoint from the Gush. And he paid with his life. Okay? And I don't think he killed anybody. So that's good. And you stabbed 2 people. So that's what's happening south of Jerusalem, that we're allowing our enemies to persist in our midst, even though the Rambam and Rashi make it very clearly that the functioning of a Jewish memshala is to provide security for the Jewish people. And that's why we don't have, let's say, if you're wondering why we're not living in Messianic era, it's because we're not, taking the opportunity to do what God wants us to do. We've been given so much. Memshala, like the Rambam says, we could have all these good things, but we're not doing it. Lahefech, outside Jerusalem where I was, on the north side, there was, no one trying to kill anybody, but 3 Jews managed to kill themselves in a car accident. And there's a certain place where people drive recklessly, and it's always the same place. And early in the morning, it's always usually a youngster who's driving, and it happens. So it teaches us that if we're not enjoying all the messianic bounty yet, it is entirely our own fault. We're supposed to keep the Torah, and the Torah also says, among other things, keep yourself safe. A person who drives recklessly is a karov lemezid. That's a type of, it's almost like murder. It's manslaughter. So too, if you leave your enemies around to kill you and they attempt to kill you, you have no one to blame but yourself or ourselves in this case. But in a chinami, it's like those Ethiopians who were first brought over to Israel. So there are many Jewish people here who are looking at them like these are Jews. Well, how could they? They're so different from you and me. They don't have the same practices. They are black. How could it be that they're Jewish? Yet they come here, and what was their two biggest things that shocked them that all these proud Jews are not doing? One, a lot of them said, "So where's the temple? You bring us over here. This supposed to be we had the Sigd and all that holidays going back to Zion, and you haven't rebuilt the temple. What's going on? What are you not doing? And we're not keeping the laws of, let's say, Nida properly. They still have the old-fashioned way. A woman who is impure, she's not to be sitting on the couch or on the chair or on the bed. She'll contaminate it. She has to be out. And they don't understand why we don't practice these halachas. So they're looking at us as though, why are we not doing what we're supposed to do? And we actually had some classes about that, how to learn how to keep the laws of Tuman Tara, because it is necessary. It is entirely necessary to learn how to keep these halachas. The Rambam actually wrote a book, How to Keep the Laws of Tuman Tara even today. Who studies them? Who practices it? Just because you have someone who goes to mikveh all the time. There's one guy I just saw today, he had a cast on his arm. And he's a very pious person. I asked him, how do you go to mikveh today? He says, I put a bag around it and everything. I was able to tov him. Does that make any sense? No, there's no such thing as dunking with such a thing. Either you remove it or not, or maintain your impurity until you're healed, and then you can go to mikveh. Okay? The sages don't obligate you to do such a thing. But he thinks he's so into doing mikveh that he even goes, even when it has no purpose. So it's important that people should know it's not sufficient just to dunk in a mikveh. There's a lot more to know. Okay, let's go back to this. By the way, highlight this in the Rambam. The Rambam says Messianic era is Bizman Tachzor HaMemshala LiYisrael. That's what the Rambam was looking forward to. And the problem is we just don't, I guess the leader is not a Messiah figure. He's just some guy. Well, yeah, when the Messianic king is around, and he's a example for Am Yisrael, will be a light unto the nations. Everyone will say, "Wow, what a great nation." We're not going to see this in Shabbos, but we're getting to there. When we keep the Torah, we do things right. Goyim look at us and say, "Wow, what great people! They're so smart. God is among them." Right? Me, goy gadol hazeh. But when we are foolish and we don't keep the Torah and we try to pander to them, we try to live up to their standards. What do? They just bash us. For example, let's just imagine something. I'm not saying it's practical to today, but imagine Am Yisrael was in a war with its enemies, and instead of thoroughly destroying its enemies, it took a Christian approach, saying turning the other cheek and trying to care for so-called innocent civilians on the other side and doing everything, even sacrificing the lives of its own sons in order to protect the other civilians and do everything beyond, going above and beyond everything that the Goyim demand of us. What would they say about us? They'd say, no, we'd say we're genocidal maniacs. We don't deserve this. We need to have sanctions. My neighbor down the block is a poor guy. His son fell in battle, and the other son had his bank account taken away from him because he's a right-wing extremist at the farm. He's guilty of the crime of farming while Jewish and not letting, well, yeah, yes, guy down the block. Within a month, one son killed, and the other son had his money removed from him because if you put someone into poverty, it's also killing him. The crime was he did not allow leftists and Ishmaelites to chase him off his own land. He stood up for himself. That's a crime. So the David Cameron, Yamach Shavuot Vizachro, and Brandon and the rest of them said he can't have his money. So the bank here in Israel took away his money. Okay, that's theft. And I spoke to the bank people yesterday. I said, I'm going to be closing my account and doing all these things. I'd rather use the bank that is not anti-Semitic. And by the way, this happened in the past. So it doesn't really help us to not keep the Torah. We get punished by the nations of the world, and we get made fun of, and we get stepped on when we do not keep the Torah. But if we assert ourselves and keep the Torah, which, by the way, tells us how to, let's say, govern a state and how to run a war, etc., then they will look up to us. When did people like Israel? When was Israel popular on the international stage? When Israel, in 67, when Israel destroys. By say Israel, I mean the Jewish people. It's not a coincidence that our country has taken the name for Am Yisrael. The proper halachic term for us is not Jewish people, it's Israel. Yisrael. That's the one the Rambam uses. He doesn't say Ha'am HaYehudi. He doesn't say HaYehudim like in Megillas Esther. He says Yisrael all the time. That's us. Okay, so what are you going to do? I think it's very important that you support the right people. And yeah, if we keep going the wrong direction, we'll keep getting hurt. It's like a guy who's wandering through the forest. He's going the wrong direction. He gets stuck in a thicket. You ever hear there's forests here? You could get stopped unless you have a machete. There's thorns and all sorts of things, and plants get in your way. Or you could just walk in the right direction. And there'll be a path. So if you try to go where there's no path through the forest, you're just going to keep getting scratched and all that. Maybe hit your head on a few branches and eaten by a bear, whatever it may be. About tovat chayei olam haba, the goodness of the world to come, ein la erech v'dimayon. It has no value or anything to which to compare. V'lo dimuha hanavim. Even the sages, even the prophets could not imagine it. Kedei shelo yivchatu otah b'dimayon, so that they not, let's say, even lessen it. If they would start describing it, even with the most lofty of terms, they would diminish it. Hu sheyishayahu omer, as the prophet Isaiah said, ayin lo ra'atha, Elohim zulathecha, yaseh lamechak helo. No eye has seen it except for you, God. You'll do it for those who are anticipating it, those who sit and wait. Kolomar, hatova shelo ra'ata otah ein navi, the goodness that no eye of a prophet has seen, Ella asa otah Elohim, the Adam shemechakela, was made by God for the man who waits. If you can edit your thing here, the Machon Mamre people added a vav in the word Elohim, which is incorrect. The word Elohim is not spelled with a vav. It's always klaser. And that's the way it is also in Tanakh, so take that out. I don't know why he added it. Most people know how to read that word even without the vav. Amru Chachamim, the sages said, Kol ha-neviim kulan lo nitnaba'u ela limot ha-Mashiach. This is a statement of the sages, by the way. He says, the sages told us that the prophets only prophesied regarding the Messianic era. Aval olam haba, ha'olam haba, ayin lo ra'atha, Elohim zulathecha. Concerning the next world, no eye has seen it except for God. Now, there are those who disagree what it means. We're going to see the Ramban says, olam haba in his conception is an era beyond that of the Messianic era. First, there's the Messianic era, and then there's olam haba, a renewal of creation, so to speak. That which the sages call the next world. Here's the answer to one of the questions one of the gentlemen had 2 days ago. They call it olam haba, the next world, or the world to come, not because it is not, I guess, present right now. Matsui means it's around. Matter of fact, it's actually in the present, so to speak. Which, by the way, I want to speak to some physicists about this. If there is no physicality in a particular way of conception, is it bound by time? Because time, now the way they understand it, is just another physical dimension. So is there time in the next world? Is it bound by time? Is it simultaneous with what's going on here right now? Are my grandfathers watching me, so to speak? Do they have a way they could turn on the television monitor and see what I'm doing at this moment? Does God make them aware of what's going on down here? Well, I said the Ramban, Nachmanides says that. But so where are they? What are the souls of those who have departed doing until this? Okay, very, very good question. So the Rambam says something very important here. The word ata means now. V'zeh ha'olam oved. Okay? Lo midishenu matsui ata v'zeh olam oved. V'achar kach yavo oto ha'olam. Okay? Don't think that the olam haba is something waiting. First, this world will come to pass. By pass, I mean end. And then the next world will begin. There are different times. No. Eina davar kain. That is not so. Ela hare hu matsui ve'omed. Nope, it exists. Matsui, it exists right now. It's standing. Shneimar ma rav tuvicha asher tzafanta li reacha. King David said, how great is your goodness that you have hidden for those who fear you. He's referring to God. Velo kira'uhu olam haba. They only called it the next world, or the world to come. Why? Ella mipnei she'otana chayim ba'in lo l'adam achar chayei ha'olam hazeh. That type of life comes to a person once he has finished this life. So it's olam haba, not because of an objective thing. It's the next world to come. It's your next world. You're in this world now. Then you're in the next world. She'anu kayamin bo beguf v'nefesh. We're in this world right now with body and soul, whatever that means. V'zehu animsal l'chol adam barishona. And this is the first existence for every person. But every one of us is going to go to a next world, assuming that we are not going to get cut off like the Rambam said. So yeah, that right now, that means, going to the way the Rambam's saying, those who have passed, I guess you could say, are currently in Olam Haba, whatever that means, their own Olam Haba. Yeah, how does that? That's a good question. So we'll have to read. And we'll see that obviously this is such a matter of dispute, I couldn't possibly give you an answer. But there's we'll close with a piyut that people know that might have what to shed on that. Some light. Wow, kind of crazy when you think about it. You know? It says, by the way, the Ram says they shouldn't think too much about these things. They get too many questions, and people tzaddik and baitos went off the derech when they're starting to think about, there is no reward. I don't think it's very important. It's good to know that there is a judge in this world, there is justice, and there is good, and there is a reward. That's what you do have to know. Hold on a second.
That your experiences, people describe relatives.
Okay. And the light also. Yeah, but does that?
In case those spiritual beings are.
Or it could be that just that people have a productive imaginations. Yeah, that means, or it means that a lot of people think similarly. When people think about, what they're finally going to do when they pass away, so they're upset about leaving their loved ones in this world. But then they remember, oh, I haven't seen my grandfather in like 70 years. So that's what they're thinking about at the time. So, Umela, but
people who had, near life experiences.
Yeah.
That experience, you call them.
Yeah.
And it's
Always the same.
Across the board, different religions, different people, the experience is almost identical from all these people, which is interesting.
Oh, okay. I think it's related to the idea across the board. People tend to really value their children. It's not just a Jewish thing, unless when you live in a really unhealthy Western society. Everybody, the people that adults care for the most are their own children. Really strange, right? Yeah. Okay. I don't think it's a necessarily Jewish thing. It's the function of our minds. It's our almost our gorilla brain talking. But I don't know. And I don't think that it's possible that people see into the next world already. Maybe it is. Maybe that's what everybody sees when you pass, you end up getting to meet everybody who's waiting for you. There were Chachamim who took this almost literally. They thought that when they passed, they wouldn't be greeted by their relatives, but by whom? Well, other sages. Okay, they'd go to yeshiva shalmala, so they have to prepare what to say. They walk into the base medrash. There's someone else there. Okay. Well, so
Came back and said, "What did you see?" He said, "Elyon the top tongue, Elyon, right?"
Okay.
So obviously, it must be something. Mora takes it seriously.
I don't know. Yeah, it takes it seriously. Maybe it's meant to be taken. Maybe it's not meant to be taken literally.
Doesn't depend on the person, but for sure,
Yeah.
maybe ask him, "What did you see?" He obviously expected him to have seen something.
Yeah, or maybe God was showing him something, but that's not necessarily what he saw. Yeah, I think so. Remember, the Ram says that it's not that Nevu is impossible. It just happens to have been a while since we had them. But there are people who are close to being Nevi'im. There are always people like that, and maybe we've had Nevi'im since the official Nevi'im were gone. It's just they were not given a message to share with everybody. So. Yeah. Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol, goes up to, So they assume, I was telling a bunch of the younger fellows a few weeks ago, the way certain people with Kabbalistic practices, the way they relate to the Ari and everything he said and did is just shy of basically calling him a Navi with his, whatever he did. So, that's what they believe. Hold on 1 second. People writing me things. What? Okay. Fine. Okay, now that we know that this reward, the due reward for keeping the commandments, and the goodness that we will merit if im shamarnu derech Hashem, if we kept to the path of God, hakatuba Torah is written in the Torah, he chaye olam haba is the life of the next world. Shneimar malani tavlach ve'arach ta'imim. You saw this passage before. It should be good for you. For the sake it will be good for you, and you'll have long days. And the vengeance, okay, the retribution for the wicked who left the paths of justice as written in the Torah, hi hakareth is excision. Shneimar hi karet tikaret nefesh hi avonova. Okay, this is just the opening statement. Sorry, it's even just the clause of the sentence. Okay, now that we know this, ma hu zeh shekatuv b'chol Torah kula im tishmeu yagia lechem v'im lo tishmeu yikra etchem. You have yikra with an aleph or with a hey? Should be with a hey. It should be yikra, lo yikra. Okay, so there. Okay, so no, if you have, yeah, I think Machon Mamre. I took this from Machon Mamre. If anybody has a printed edition with a hey, it should be yikra. Yes, that's a printed edition. Yikra means that will happen. Yikra means will be called upon. So it should be from the word. It should be from the word happen with the hey. Yikra. So he says. So now that we know there's a schar in the olam haba and there's the onish in the olam haba, what does it mean that if you listen to God, you'll get this, and if you don't listen, you'll get that? This is a good question. The Tochacha. What does the Tochacha say? You read it twice. It says you keep God's commandments, so you'll have material prosperity. Oh, and you'll also have the sanctuary will be in your midst, and you'll chase your enemies. Right? What's the Dr. England said? You know, they talk about disproportionality in fighting the enemy. It's a bracha. You know, you have 10 chase 100, and 100 will chase 10,000, whatever it may be. That's a good thing. Using disproportionate force is a sign of blessing. It's not a sign of anything wrong, chas v'shalom. So what are all these blessings? And also, if you don't keep the Torah, the Tochacha is full of there. It doesn't say you'll get punished with kares. The Tochacha in Devarim is 96 separate retributions mentioned there, and none of them are referring to the next world. They're all in this world. So what's going on? Tigon sova v'ra'av. Let's give examples. You'll have satiety or famine, milchama v'shalom, war and peace, u'malchut v'shiflut. Malchus, that means that's similar to what Rambam said. Memshalit. Malchus means you'll have sovereignty, or shiflus, you'll be oppressed. Yeshivata aretz v'galut. Okay, being able to dwell in the land or being in exile. Oh, look, the Rambam says part of yeshivas haaretz and having malchus go hand in hand. For a long time, for many decades, this was lost on even religious Jewish people and even scholars. They didn't think yeshiva sa'aretz was something that we should strive for. They're even against it. But even when they said you could have yeshiva sa'aretz, going to the next stage and having malchus isn't something you should strive for. But in the Maimonidean / Rashi way of thinking, they go hand in hand. How could a Jewish people live in Eretz Yisrael and not strive to rule over themselves in some way? Success, material success, or loss. Ushar kol divrei habrith. Divrei habrith is the Tochacha. Here's what happens: you keep the Torah in Parshas Bahar or Parshas Kisavo. What's that talking about? Kol otan advarim emet hayu v'yityu. All of those are true. They were and they will be. Ubizman she'anu osim kol mitzvot Torah yagiu eleinu tovot ha'olam hazeh kulam. If we keep the Torah, we'll get everything good in this world. This is something that people have to also realize from the Rambam, which is lost also even today on great scholars. Even if we do not succeed in bringing about the Messianic era, the redemption today, we don't have a Messianic king. Who says we can't still enjoy good? We can appoint a king who's close to being Messianic. And like the Rambam says, and if he doesn't succeed 100% like everything was supposed to be, it's just another good Davidic king like we've had previously in our history. What's wrong with that? For some reason, Am Yisrael got so used to only having the bad for a few thousand years that it became almost a din, and I could name you rabbis who told this, you're not allowed to strive for any of the good or take any steps toward the good until the Messiah himself shows up. So that's not a Rambam way of thinking. The Rambam says it's always available, the goodness in this world. We could always strive to have a Jewish state and a Jewish ruler and building a Beis HaMikdash to whatever extent possible and keeping all the commandments, even if we fall short of 100% perfection. Okay, so So people should read these things more. They should read this more often, at least 5 times a year, I think. V'zman she'anu ovrin alihen tikre otanu haraot haktuvot. And when we don't keep the Torah, the bad will happen. We'll get the punishment. Once again, it should be with a hey, not an aleph. Okay, tikre. And that's the way it's in the printed edition, so we'll correct it over here. I think the Rambam himself wrote it with a hey. A lot of times I no longer trust Machon Rambam because they say, in order to make it easier to read, they've added letters. But even so, this goodness that has been promised, that's not the ultimate reward for keeping the commandments. And that does happen in this world, but it's not the ultimate one. Same thing with the retribution. That's not the end of it. A person could suffer all 96 that are in Sefer Devarim, but there's still more for violating the Torah in the next world. Elakahu Hesea Hadvarim. Now he'll explain what it means. Okay, here's the gist of what it should be. Yeah, question?
Yes, Rav Rabinovich's edition has an aleph in both places.
The printed edition?
Yeah, Rav Rabinovich's Pashuta.
God Pshuta also has with an aleph? Does he
Yes.
have a footnote there? Why?
No, he just takes it as collect from his manuscripts.
Mhm. I'll have to check the Makbili then. Do you have a Frankel there?
No.
No. I don't know. Maybe it should be. Hold on. That's a good question. Even if it's Tikra Utana means it will call us, it wouldn't be visited upon us. Tikrena? I don't even have that. Interesting. Okay. Let's move on. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Natan Lanu Torazo, Eitz Chaim, the God, the Holy One, blessed be, gave us this Torah, the tree of life, so to speak. Whoever does everything as written in the Torah and also has proper understanding of it. De'ag Mura means complete knowledge of the Torah, the proper knowledge by it. You could have De'ag Mura Batori, you can know Shas and Poskim and the Tanakh and all the Mefarshim by heart and the Mishnayos, but if you don't know how to apply it, and you're just, like a Chamor no Sei Svarim, then it doesn't help. You have to understand it. So Cheba Nechaye Olam Haba. So through it, he merits life in the next world. Ufi Godel Ma'asav Godel Chokhmato Hu Zocheh. It all depends on the measure, the greatness of his deeds and of his wisdom. V'hivtichanu b'Torah. We are promised in the Torah. She'im na'aseh ota b'simcha u'v'tovat nefesh. If we are to keep the Torah with happiness and good soul, means with joy, you do it willingly. And he enjoys its wisdom all the time. Then God will remove from us all that hampers us from keeping the Torah. The more you keep the Torah, the more God makes it that you can keep the Torah. Mitzvah, goreres mitzvah, schar mitzvah, mitzvah. They mean the same thing. One mitzvah brings to another, because that's the reward of keeping the mitzvahs. Kugon choli, hold on a second. Yeah. He says God will remove everything that's preventing us. For example, Kugon choli, holy, umilchama. Holy means sickness, war, ra'av, famine, v'chayotze bahan, and everything else like that. You keep the Torah, God will remove everything that's preventing you. It will make it easier for you to keep the Torah. And on the hefich, v'yashpia lanu kol ha'tovot hamechazakim et yadenu la'asud ha'torah. He will shower us with all the goodness that allows us, that strengthens our hand, means makes it easier for us to keep the Torah. Tigon sova v'shalom v'rabot kesef v'zahav, like satiety, peace, lots of gold and silver means wealth. Kedei shelo na'asok kol yomenu b'dvarim shehigiat shehaguf tzarich lahem, so that we don't spend all our days, working toward what we need, our material needs. If your material needs are taken care of, let's say you retire quite early and you have a good pension and you don't need to work so much more. So you should spend as much time as you can studying the Torah. Don't start running after more money. Ella neshev pnuyim lilmod b'chokhmah. We should sit free to learn wisdom. By the way, the wisdom of the Torah. V'lasod hamitzvah, to keep the commandments. Kidei shenizkeh l'chayei olam haba. V'cheinu omer b'Torah achar sheivtiach b'tovot olam hazeh. It says in the Torah, after the promises of the goodness in this world, utztaka tiyalanu. Tzedakah means it's good for us. It shall be good for us. It's like God gave us a gift. Vatachshavelo tzedakah. For Abraham, the tzedakah that God gave him was that because God trusted, Abraham trusted in God, God made him all the promises of good for the future. If we were to, it's also been promised that if we abandon Torah midatenu, midas means willingly. Sometimes a person is shogeg, they shouldn't be punished for such things. Shogegim aren't really necessarily punished. It is a problem if they don't know. You have to study more. But those who willfully abandon the Torah for hevlei hazman, the vanities that are fleeting. Hevlei hazman means not this time, means type of thing that are temporal. They don't last. Like food and drink. It says kanyan shneimar, as it says regarding the Jewish people, when they get too fat, vayishman yisharun vayivad. Jeshurun became fat, and then he kicked back. Okay, God was. What's the question? Yes. Philosophy. Yeah. Because he said just before the Torah, there's two things you could do. The Torah tells you what to do, and also to understand it. The Godel Chochmaso. You have to have understanding of the Torah. It's not sufficient to know it by heart, which is great, by the way. You also have to understand it. You have to apply it. The problem is that a person who knows too much but has no application skills is not going to be a sage. Matter of fact, this is kind of scary. You have to know who to ask a question to, a halachic question. There are many who could recite the Shulchan Aruch, Hilchot Shabbos, and the Mishnah Berurah by heart. But will they know how to answer a question and apply what they know? You have to have the ability to apply. Okay. Let's see. This is taken from Parshas Ha'azinu, it's one of Psukim, right? It's the beginning of the downfall of Am Yisrael. They get too much, they get fat, and then like they say, the cycle. Good times breed weak men, and then weak men give us bad times, and the bad times create strong men. So the Rambam said earlier, he says he wrote more Nevuchim later, the generation of the wilderness was raised, the ones who came in Eretz Yisrael, so they were raised in the toughest of conditions to make them strong, to fight. And then the next generation that entered the land, so they had all the brachas that God had promised, like it says in Sefer Yeshua, Hakol Ba. It was like a messianic era, so to speak. They had peace and prosperity, and the temple had been built. But then they actually had instances of idolatry. Why? Too much time. And it even says the sages who had survived, the ones who had known Moshe Rabbeinu, and they learned directly from him, they didn't do enough to make sure to keep the people on the straight and narrow. The true judge will remove from those who abandon the Torah all of the goodness of this world. You abandon the Torah, goodness of the world is going to evaporate. The goodness of this world, which fattened them, allowed them to kick back. So if that's what you're going to get, you're going to lose it. And he will he'll bring upon them all of the bad, the evilness, but evilness I think is more of a conscious thing. It involves agency. This is just the bad that prevents them from acquiring the next world. So that they go lost in their wickedness. God, basically, that's sort of the punishment. Did God take away Pharaoh's free will? What? But wait, the Rambam says it's a principle. It's in the same book. I'm reading Hilchot Teshuva here. Free will is one of the essential principles of the justice. If a person has no free will, how could you hold him accountable? How could he be rewarded for what he did? No, the removal of the chance now to change one's situation is the punishment. They already were bad, and now the punishment is they don't have a chance to get out of it. It's the ma'adavar domeh. It used to be they give a person skila, so they push him off of a height of a few meters, okay, about a few heights of a man, like a height like this. But imagine you could say his skila is he'll push him off from something that's about 2 miles high. So he's falling. The punishment's already happening, but I'm sure he has a few seconds to think about what he's done wrong, and maybe he's even having thoughts of tshuva. But the punishment is already happening. So that's like the Rambam says. Their punishment is that all the good is removed from them, and they won't have time to repent or change their ways and earn olam haba. Instead, they're going to be lost in their wickedness. That's well. What? No, I think that it's our job to destroy them. The problem is when it comes to wicked people like that, there is a mitzvah that nekama is a good thing, by the way. Nekama, vengeance, is something we're not supposed to do to our fellow Jews, right? Lo tikom v'lo titor. However, nekama against those who harm Am Yisrael is a commandment. It is a good thing. It's what David Amel wrote songs about, and that is our job to do to them. I think it's more like this. You know that there's an establishment that controls everything, even though they're not trying to keep the Torah, that would be happy not to make war and destroy the bad guys. However, God wants to do a chesed and bring about the destruction of the bad guys, so he's forcing them, he's basically taking the riddle that they're going to continue to fight until they're just standing, until they're dead, but they have nothing left. Their stubbornness is going to lead to their own downfall. Okay, it's like Nazi Germany. It had to be thoroughly destroyed. So they could have surrendered a long time. I think years before the war was over. There are people who tried killing Hitler. It's amazing because of God's plan. They did not succeed, but they wanted to surrender to the Allies. Save something. But God brought it that no, he fights to the bitter end so that everything would be utterly destroyed. So too, that's what's happening. The thing that's allowing the destruction of Gaza in our days is the fact that they are not letting up. I don't know why they haven't completed it yet, but whatever. I guess that's why I'm not in charge. As it's written in the Torah, what? Yes. Okay. No. Right beforehand. Yeah.
So the people everybody that keeps the mitzvahs and do the Biyat Torah, they spend people that don't, ain't the valid.
Yeah. What does it mean if a person has no chelik in olam haba?
So
So let's say a person. So yeah, that's a good question.
Oh.
The Ramban will get into that. Yeah, a few people. The Ramban will get into that. What does that even mean? Yeah. So yeah, I personally I don't understand the concept. I think it's trying to. It's almost hyperbolic, but then the Gemara takes it seriously. The Gemara actually analyzes it. Are you sure they have no chelek in the olam haba? Or even if you have a little bit of chelek, what does it mean to have a chelek, a share in the world to come? And what about, like we said last week? I don't know. Well, I think that actually this topic is a whole course of study. But the Ramban, we said, we'll ask this question. I'm sure there's a lot of in-betweens. The Rambam's talking very black and white. There are those people who get the chayil olam haba, and those people are cut off. But I'm sure that there's billions of people have lived in history, and billions more are going to be going in front of the true judge. I'm sure there must be a lot of gray areas, right? Or the concept that the Rambam doesn't introduce here explicitly, which is that no one's asked a question yet, which I'm surprised, but one of the Rambam's biggest questions, or biggest, I guess, topics that's coming up, so you can read about it, is, don't we have this concept of the purification of Gehenna? It says that there are the souls of the people who, for whatever reason, have to go somewhere to a purgatory and be burned, so to speak, for a certain amount of time before they are able to pass into Olam Haba. What does that mean? So it means that they have a chelek after they have gone through that. Okay? Or some get stuck in the fire, and some don't even get the fire, they're totally cut off. So when we get to the Ramban, we'll see that there's a lot more that the Rambam's trying to teach here. The Rambam's, I don't think his goal was to actually give a complete eschatology or even this idea, a complete Olam Haba. He's just trying to tell you what you need to know for this world. Okay? You need to know for this world, like the Rambam said earlier, you have to judge everything. Is this going to imagine any moment that you're about to do anything? This is going to tip the scales in favor for myself and for my nation. That's what's important. But the nitty gritty of this, it's like I don't know, has anybody here ever committed a crime? Been put on trial? Okay, so there's some people, they don't think about, just don't do this. Don't, no, that's tax evasion, that's extortion, that's money laundering. Those are the types of things that unfortunately people fall into because they think it's victimless. No Jews are armed robbers, but that's the type of thing that you hear about in Chutz La'aretz, that happens. That's the typical Yetzer Hara. And no one's thinking about how then the lawyer is going to sit down with him and say, look, you're on trial for this. If you could plea bargain, you'll get this. And if they have witnesses and then they have this and that, it depends on how much you didn't cover your tracks. That's for the next world. That's where you're going to be when you go in for the Dayan. So the Rambam's not talking about how your individual case in the divine court is going to be. How you're going to say that, well, I get a chelik in Olam Haba, but I do deserve a punishment for this. That's not what the Rambam gets to, and certainly I'm not even a lawyer in this world, so I don't know what it's going to be like in the next world. It's kind of intimidating, though. You have to be very fearful. I remember, I heard that Rav Shechter was at a Siyum Mishnayos, as a child for his bar mitzvah, finished Shas. They said Rav Shechter was crying, and I heard about this years ago. Okay, I can understand it, but then I actually made a Siyum a few months ago, and my children were there, and I got very overwhelmed, and I couldn't finish saying it. I had to wait for 5 minutes and cry it out for a second because I suddenly had a terrible feeling about something. Like, here's what we could have done. Here's all the time you could have spent studying this, and you could get to this achievement that you finished Mishnayos, Kodshim, and Taros, and they realize, why didn't I do this beforehand? How many times have I finished? How many people have finished Shas? So I had a roommate. He finished Shas twice by the time he was 30. That's great. That's pretty good. Some people have that potential, but then again, they could look at you and say, you could have done even better yourself. You could have done it 4 times by the time you were 18. I don't know. So the Rambam wants you to maximize what you're doing in this world. Maximize it now, and sometimes the shock of reading this type of thing will set you straight. We have a typical shock. How often do we get this shock? About Yom Kippur time or so, and it sets us straight, right? But how long does that last? Well, I don't know, by Sukkot's time it wears off, right? It says, "Hu shekatuv Torah ve'avadta et oyevecha asher yishalachenu Hashem bach." It says, "You shall serve your enemies, who God will send among you." God sends the enemies there to oppress you, so then you'll end up serving them. You didn't serve God. Tachat asher lo avadta as Hashem alecha b'simcha v'tuv levav. You didn't serve God with happiness, so you know what? You're going to have to serve someone else. See if you like that. So you can make the choice is yours. Let's read one more halacha because it is officially mincha time. Nimsa perush kol otana brachot v'aklalo al derech zo. What? Okay, yeah, that's why I have another halacha. Okay, nimsa perush kol otana brachot v'aklalo al derech zo. Here's what the explanation of all the brachas and klalos in the Toch are. Klamar im avadtem and Hashem b'simcha. If you served the Lord with happiness, through happiness, ushmartem darko, and you kept His way. He will allow you to enjoy all the goodness and all the blessings, and He will distance the curses. See? Until you are free to make yourselves wise. And wise in a word? In British, perhaps? And wisen yourselves in the Torah and engage in it. So you merit life in the next world. It will be good for you in the world that is entirely good. That's the next one. And you also have long time in that next world, which is entirely long. What does it mean to have arichus yamim? Arichus yamim in this world means you live to be very old. What's arichus yamim in the next world? Well, it's an eternity, but some people get less olam haba. Some people have a time limit, 50 years olam haba, and that's it. But the people who get arichus yamim, they get 120 years in olam haba. Maybe there is time. The Rambam implied that there is time, but the other way he says, long time in olam haba. So you end up earning 2 worlds. Good life in this world, which leads to good life in the next. If you don't acquire in this world wisdom and good deeds, what are you going to earn? Okay, let's say you did no averos, but you didn't get any Torah. Okay, so you didn't stock up for the next world. There's no deeds. There's no action that you could actually do to create anything, or cheshbon, or accounts, or das. In this case, means knowing something, knowledge Chachma, wisdom, b'she'ol. She'ol is a poetic term for the grave. Once you pass to the next world, you can't bring anything. You have to stock up in this world. I was reading, I heard, there's a Rosh Hashiva here in Yerushalayim. I can't believe I didn't see this until yesterday. On Sunday, at the age of 88, he became a father for the first time. Okay, so sometimes, yeah, for the first time. Very surprising. So shows you, one, you have to keep thinking about the future. Well, no, Avram Avinu, he beat Avram Avinu by 2 years. He beat Avram Avinu by 2 years. Avram Avinu had his first son at the age of 86. Avram Avinu became a father at the age of 86. Okay? Yaakov Avinu became a father at what age? 85. Okay? So, he's up there. Okay? But then again, the difference between him and Yaakov Avinu was that Yaakov Avinu only married at the age of 84. Okay? No, that's an explicit Rashi. That's the pasuk that says it. Yaakov Avinu, for whatever reason, the question is on Yaakov Avinu. His father married at the age of 40, as did his brother. And the question was, he had been told, the way we could calculate this, he had been told 21 years before that to get married. So what was he waiting for? Okay, why didn't you just do it right away? Well, it's Kasha and Yaakov Avinu. We'll stop there. I'm sorry we don't get to learn all of this because there's a lot more to see.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.